Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I am here this morning to give my very strong support for Senate Bill 727, an act concerning conflicts of interest under the Code of Ethics for public officials and state employees, or more simply, the Clean Government Bill. SB 727 is a simple, straightforward bill. The bill prohibits a legislator from receiving more than $1,000 from an organization that benefits from state spending. For example, state contractors, lobbying firms, and public employee unions. It is absurd that someone on the payroll of a public employee union or a firm that lobbies state legislators can serve in our General Assembly. At least a lot of people elsewhere think it is absurd because in most states and in Washington, D.C., a legislator could go to jail for what is regularly done and perfectly legal today in Connecticut. That is because what is okay around our capital is considered a bribe in most places. It is so off the mark, in fact, that I am surprised lobbyists are able to make a living here in Connecticut. Why would anyone hire a lobbyist when you can just put a legislator on your payroll? For far too long, Connecticut has been the butt of jokes about political corruption. Every few years, the moniker Corrupticate is again raised in response to yet another scandal. It is no wonder when we have laws that permit flagrant conflicts of interest between public officials and the state citizens. And it is all done with a wink and a nod from one's colleagues in government. Let's put an end to it. Part of the problem is that the foxes are running the henhouse. Our ethics rules start off as ethics light, and then on appeal, everyone is given a pass because people have a right to earn a living. That's the same argument you hear when you go to a foreign country and the police demand a bribe with the excuse that they are not paid enough. That may be true, but it is still a bribe. And in most of those countries, unlike here, it is illegal. Well, this is Connecticut. We're part of the United States of America. Let's make this sleazy practice illegal here, too. Serving in the state legislature or state government is a privilege. It is not a right. Those unable to serve without conflicts of interest should not be allowed to serve. Under this bill, they won't be. Connecticut citizens deserve higher standards than what we have today in our capital. I urge this committee and the General Assembly to pass Senate Bill 727 and remove this stain from our state government. I also call on Governor Malloy to get behind this bill and follow through on his commitment to bring more transparency to his administration. A vote against this bill is a vote against good government. So I appeal to the highest principles in each of you and your colleagues in the General Assembly in asking that you do the right thing and support this bill. And please demand that any legislator who does not support this bill explain to us why he or she is against clean government in Connecticut. Thank you.
We would be happy to answer any of your questions, of course.
Through you, Mr. Chair. You know, conflict of interest and integrity of the legislative process is absolutely critical. I couldn't agree with you more. And I appreciate you putting forth this bill, but it does create an awful lot of unintended consequences. And I'm reading through your testimony, and the strength in which you have indicted the process that is currently, as you described, is a little bit a bit of a concern to me. And the reason why is this: you describe us and compare us to Washington and some of the things that we're doing right now in the state. But the fact of the matter is, we are a part-time legislative body. We have people who give of their time and work a full-time job in some cases and still volunteer and contribute to the legislative process. What you're saying is the fact that what is the possibility of what you're going to suggest to those people who keep a part-time job or a full-time job and still want to serve? What you're saying is some of the things that you're talking about is tantamount to a denial of the right to work. What would you say to that question?
Well, Representative, it obviously is an issue, but it doesn't mean that bad things aren't happening. So let's solve the issue of the conflicts of interest. And maybe we ought to make it a full-time legislature if that would solve the problem. Or maybe, hey, pay everybody a full year's salary and only have the legislature last as long as it is. There are ways to solve that problem, but the problem I have, and what really disturbs me and has for years as I've gotten more familiar with what goes on here at the Capitol, is that that's always used as an excuse. That, well, a person has to make a living. We have to make ends meet. And therefore, everybody's given a pass. And everybody here lives in a bubble and accepts this as okay. It's not okay. When the average citizen hears about people being on the payroll of a public employees union and serving in the legislature, they're disgusted. And when people hear about people serving being partners in law firms that lobby, and they're paid a full-time salary and are serving here in the legislature, they're disgusted. They find it reviling, and everybody here thinks it's okay. It's not. It is not okay. And so find some other solution to that problem. But don't permit the conflicts of interest and the sleaziness that exists here.
Is that your rationale for pointing out public officials and defining that different than the public statutes?
No, this language, I believe, is taken from the statutes. Public officials is a defined term, and state employees is a defined term.
As I read the language, and if that was to fully be applied, you are potentially saying that nearly half of the legislative body would be out of this chamber, according to your conflict of interest statute. I mean, again, and I think you mentioned earlier potentially putting the cart before the horse in regards to saying making this a full-time legislative body. I think that's a discussion worth having. But given that our structure and in historical context we are a part-time legislative body, what would you say to remedy that if this bill was to put into effect?
I'd say what my
over
mother
half
used
of
to,
it.
I'd say what my mother used to tell me, and that is just if half the people are lying, it doesn't make it okay. If half the people are accepting bribes, it doesn't make it okay. It's not okay. Fix the problem. Having these conflicts of interest is simply not okay. And anybody here in the legislature who thinks it is okay is not talking to informed voters, because everybody I talk to who hears about what goes on up here is outraged. Most people can't believe that what is proposed in Senate Bill 727 isn't already illegal here in Connecticut.